Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of I Never Knew, or Inc. with life coach Maureen, where I interview guests who tell their stories of struggle and triumph, and we help one another. Today, I have a most amazing guest, and I was so excited when I found him, and you're going to find him really, really fun and personable. And his story is incredible, not only about his family, but also about himself. So today we're talking to David Durazi. Now, David Durazi he was born in a small suburb in Los Angeles. And his first job was at 9 years old when he became a paper boy and took over his older brother's paper route. David grew up watching his dad as a popular Emmy Award-winning cartoonist in national television and radio, and we're going to talk about who his dad is. He experienced a lot of ups and downs being raised by his father, who had a total of 5 nervous breakdowns and 37 shock treatments in his lifetime. David has a BS in biology, chemistry, and psychology from UC Irvine. He also has a master's degree from Cal State, Los Angeles. He watched his dad become a super salesman in between and after his television career, and attributes his success to a number of salespeople for nearly 40 years of observing his father become very successful. We're going to tell you about his books. He has written a life story of his father, Tony Durazi, the in-between artist. And in 2 months, he's got a new book coming out about his sister, who was a teenage starlet. And her name is Kathy O'Dare. And his book is called Is Everybody Happy? So that one's really exciting. We're going to let everybody know where to find him. So without further ado, welcome to my guest, David. Hi, David.
Hi, how you doing, Maureen? I'm really excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you and hear from you. And I think what's really neat is when we hear stories about successes, but also the struggle behind it, and then how we managed to get through all of that. And that's what really caught my eye was, of course, I'm a mental health advocate as a certified life coach. So the interesting part is we can see people in success, but also struggle. So let's start with your father's story. I know you found some books in your mom's garage.
Yeah, but my mom's been gone like 11 years now, and about 12, 13 years ago, we were kind of going through her garage. She was hitting her high 80s, and she said, David, you might want to do something with this someday. And it was like, I'd say 6 or 8 boxes of my dad's journals, all his scrapbooks since 1929, when he started, when he went to the university in New York, the American League of Arts, and he was compared with Michelangelo and all the things that happened to him. And he went on to, he had his first nervous breakdown when he went to college back there. And then he came back, and then he won with his 2 art pieces for the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933. So what a comeback. That was 6 months of he got back to north. His dad had a brother that was a psychiatrist and helped him get better. And my dad, was drawing since he was 4 years old. And then from there, he heard about Walt Disney needing an in-between artist. He had a tragic thing happen in Chicago. His fiance was actually committed suicide when he broke up with her. So that shook him up. And then so he had to get out of Chicago. And so he heard about Walt Disney needing an in-between artist. And they call it the in-between, the tweenies or in Disney. I mean, he worked on Snow White. He created Dopey, the character Dopey for Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. And then when he was there, he always wanted to be on a top radio station. So that radio station KHJ was down the street, and basically he kept bugging the guy to get his own radio show, and he did in 1948. And from there, he actually, in between all this, he did vaudeville in 38 states in those days. So anyway, he was an amazing guy, you'd mentioned. He had many breakdowns, Five Rivers breakdowns between all this, was able to come back every time. And he just was a charismatic guy, and everybody loved my dad. And he wrote about all his experience, even when he was in his mental states, and I think everybody can get a lot out of that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And you have excerpts and things in the book from your dad's journals and the things that he had written in there.
Correct. He was a poet, as a writer. Yeah, he did vaudeville. I have all those pictures when he was in vaudeville in the early 30s, before the war. And then he got on radio and TV. But there's probably about 50 pictures in there. It's a real easy read, that book. Yeah. And I think anybody that has a family out there, or friends that they're going through, especially now that mental awareness is, everybody's talking about it. For years, everybody didn't even want to deal with it. But in this world today, we have all these people on the street. We have families that are in denial. But you know what? What I've heard one time, and I've read that, I've been told that people that are mentally ill, sometimes they're borderline genius. And if you could pull that genius out of them, it's like, wow. I mean, my dad could do anything, when it becomes to entertainment. And it's quite a story. And I think it's a feel-good story about mental illness. And my sister's book that's coming out the same way. It took a lot out of me. It took me 6 years to write this first book. It's my sister book. I did it in about 2 years.
Wow.
And it's been about a year in editing, but it'll be worth. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And
yeah.
What I hear from you and see in you when you speak of it is just this love that you have for him and this admiration. And I think when you have mental illness, there's this stigma that everybody's judging you and you're not worth anything, you're worthless. And when I see you carrying on this legacy of your family, I love it. It melts my heart, because you're right. There is genius in there. And I feel that sometimes when we go through more than most people, we do come out ahead, and we have that stronger mindset. We have that stronger intellect, that we understand how to get through life because we've had a lot more struggle. Think of people who've never had the struggle. What if they had to really fight? What if they had to learn? Nothing. They're just going coasting through life.
They're day to day. And one of my best friends growing up, I used to say, man, two boys and their parents, both, one's a teacher and the other one had a good job. Didn't seem like they have any problems or any discord within the family. I always used to say, why me? My God. But then after it all happened, I get it. I'm the only one left. So I have a lot to share with the world, and hopefully it'll make a difference if people read these books and hear this story. And then my next book, I think I'll write about my life and how I got through it all, because it wasn't easy. Writing this story of my dad, I cried. I was up in the mountains. I got a mountain cabin up near Lake Arrowhead in California, Crestline, and it's by a lake. And I used to write it. And they were just on pads of paper, all its notes. And I'm going, oh my God. So finally, after 6 years, I said, I'm done. I really tried to condense it. I didn't want to make a 300-page book about my dad. I just wanted to get all the highlights so people that do experience any mental illness in their family or their friends could understand there is some light at the end of the tunnel. They're not, some of them seem dark, some of them seem just wacko, but if you really zero in, I mean, you really learn a lot. And it's like, I could, I've had a lot of ups and downs in sales and whatever I've done in life. Like when I was a kid, I started as a paper boy, but in my early adulthood, with my first marriage, I had 4 sons. I worked 3 jobs, and but anything wouldn't upset me. And I was number one. I mean, everywhere I went, because I don't get rattled. Like you said, if you experience it, you don't really let anything get to you. You know, life is short.
Yeah.
You
I love
know,
that you said I don't get rattled. And that is really almost the goal today is mindfulness is not getting rattled by
yeah,
what's going on around you. But it's a practice thing. It's a learned thing. And as a life coach, it's something that I teach people to do to learn how to not look for that validation and not be affected by what's going around you. But we're humans. We're humans having human experiences. Now, what's
exactly.
interesting to me, you're right. Back in your dad's generation, I mean, I even look at my parents who are in their 70s now, and this whole mental health thing to them is like, get over it, you know?
E-
And, so back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, it was even more don't talk about it and get over it. So
Exactly.
you mentioned that he had shock therapy, and I know this was something they did, but I didn't realize they were doing it even as late as the 50s. So tell us about his explanation of the shock therapy and if he felt what it did to him or how it helped him or hurt him.
Well, it kind of, it's weird. I mean, I'm reflecting and I'm thinking about it right now. When I was like 6 or 7 years old, my dad disappeared and he went into the Camarillo State Hospital. And that's where he had the 37 shock treatments. That was that was in the mid 50s. And it's like he lost his memory from a car accident. He had the first nervous breakdown prior to this, but this is when it all started happening again. He lost his memory for like 6 months and finally gave him 37 shock treatments and he came out of it. Just like when I saw that movie, It's a Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. That's kind of the way, I saw it and I says, oh my God, that was my dad, but in a different way. He was an artist. That guy was a teacher, but they were able to literally bring him back. And I mean, he used to talk about it and he just dreaded even talking about it, but he knew he was able to come back to life. And he came back after all that. And then he started finding himself and he started selling calendars and just specialty items. And he got on TV because he did bit parts here and there, and he was on Dragnet. He was on All in the Family. I saw that growing up. He was on what's that other one? All in the Family. Oh, he was on Sanford and Son too. There wasn't many Caucasian guys on Sanford and Son, but he found the spot and he hung out with them and he talked about Carol O'Connor and All in the Family. I don't know if you remember those shows or not.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm older than you think. I'm a grandma, and
All
yeah,
right. All right.
I'm over half century mark. So yeah, that was the stuff that my
Yeah.
dad would play as kids. That was
Yeah.
my dad's go to with Welcome Back, Cotter, and
Yeah.
uh,
Remember those? Yeah.
Tears, and all those classics. So it's funny how that would never, today how society has changed, how we can never have any kind of programming like that. But I think it's so fascinating. And I also, this is my own personal belief and my own personal experience. I find people that are very self-aware or have a lot of mental either struggle or disorders or just more in tune with themselves, even if it's just being an empath or ADHD or autistic. I find there is such a creative side. And so when you said that about your dad, I went, of course he was an artist, of course he was
Yeah.
creative. So
Yeah.
to maintain that during probably the shame and the embarrassment and the struggle of trying to get a hold of his mental illness to keep doing it, did he draw during that time when he lost his memory?
Yes, he did. And all that he did, it's like, and what's weird, they were crazy drawings. You could tell his mind was all mixed up. He went through cycles, and I had all those drawings and paintings, and it's weird, by in both these books, I talk about my experiences, even like even with my dad when I was 14, I went to the mental hospital for the Christmas function, and you see, and all these people, and in my dad's world, it was all new to me. I've never seen anything like it because, I mean, they were doing lobotomies back then. And my dad told me about that, and they thought it was part of the brain that was causing the people going crazy. And I'll tell you
Wow.
that. And then, and my sister, when I went and she was in halfway houses the last 10, 12 years of her life. And I went there every couple of weeks. And it's just, there's one thing in my sister's book they'll read is I went, my son, I have 4 sons and 2 of them play in a band. So one time they decided to go, it was like 60 people in this halfway house. And I asked the halfway house, can they come in here where they eat in their eating area and do a little concert? And they did. And it was like, what is that movie that Ronnie Howard did with all those old people? They come to life with the alien. I don't know what it was. Yeah, but
Cocoon.
Cocoon, yeah. It was like all these people that were mentally ill started getting up and dancing. Music just brought it. It came out of them. It was and I have a video of that. But anyway, it was interesting, and I just see that there's so much in those minds, and people give up on them, and they, and I hate to say this, but they drug the heck out of them in these institutions, and that's the only way, load them with cigarettes and load them with medication, and that's these people. I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and I got to see it, and I share a lot of it in my book about my sister. With my dad, I talked my dad in at 14 to putting himself in the hospital, because even way back then, you couldn't just put people in; they had to consent to it. Wow. So my mom set me out there with him and said, "Hey, can you get your dad to go to the hospital?" I said, "Mom, I got to get him to go." And she said, "Yeah, I was her golden boy. I had 2 brothers that had issues too, but they weren't mental so much, So
wow,
yeah,
wow.
so I carried the look.
It sounds like mom was an anchor. I mean, it sounds like sounds like you and mom, thank goodness, had this stability between the two of you. And after experiencing this between your sister and your father, and you said your brothers as well, my goodness, your norm doesn't look like what everybody else's norm was like growing up. I can, you said it was new going to the mental facility and doing the Christmas party, but did it become like at 14, convincing him to go in the hospital? Did this become just kind of a new norm? Did you notice, hey, this is a little different than my friends? This is like.
Yes, I did. And it's weird. I kind of lived and kind of, like I said, I've never had to write about it till I wrote these books. And basically I kept it in, but I nobody even knew growing up that my dad was sick. I covered up, and here in football, I was the most inspirational player on my senior high football team. Nobody knew my dad was like that. It was crazy, but I kind of channeled. I guess what you can do, like you're a life coach, I guess I channeled all my positive in my life and tried to. I think even in sales, you do that. When I write my book, it's like or like a running back on a football team. You just focus on that, and I've heard baseball players at baseball games, they wonder, all these hecklers and all these crowds, does it really bother them? No, they're zoned in. And everybody in the society we live in, they have the difficulty in just zoning in what their passion's about or whatever they're doing.
I love that. You'll see me look down and start writing some notes, because when you say something that I'm like, oh, we got to talk about that. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I worked in corporate in the medical field, started in nursing, and then I was in the billing, and eventually worked up to a coordinator that trained doctors how to code and all the insurance guidelines and all that unfun stuff. Yeah. And I stayed in that for 28 years, but I had started my business in the meantime. And I kept hanging on to this corporate job thinking, this is stability, and this is fun. Like my coaching and my writing of my books, and this is all fun. My belief wasn't that I could make a living at it, but you're right. When I zoned in, and now that I've retired from the corporate, it's not even work, right? Because you're zoned into it. Exactly. When you're passionate, and if you're following that passion, then you stop listening. You put blinders on and earmuffs on, and you're like, okay, I know what I got to do. We just don't know how to keep that going in life.
Exactly.
And I'm like you, growing up, we were not to talk about things in the home. Mm-hmm. So I think you very similarly were like, we don't go out and talk about these things. I reunited with a girlfriend from high school, and she had no idea about my childhood, and we were like best friends. And I never had her at the house. I was always at her house, and she said, you were insecure. You had all these things going on. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, oh my God, I envied you because you were so positive, and you've always been a life coach, Maureen. And so I get you, because there's this piece sometimes that we want to hide. And whether it's our family situation or internally something in us, that's how we cope. I think that's our coping mechanisms, right?
I think it is. Yeah, definitely. I think, in other words, and you learn from everything that you do throughout life, and everything around you. And yeah, to be able to write about it. And it's like right now at my stage, I could be retired right now. And it's weird. I started working for a friend maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I worked for corporations too. I worked for Merck at one time for 16 years, and I worked for other corporations. I've been, the top gun in every company I ever worked for. But I decided I just work a little bit, and all of a sudden, and now I got to get to writing more. But I was able to write these 2 books, but I'm making more than I've ever made, and I'm independent. I represent a couple of companies, and I have the relationships, and I mean, I've been to all these courses and everything, and and I was a big fan of Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Wayne Dyer, Dennis Waitley. I've read every one of their books, and I like the biographies too, and the successful people. I'm a big baseball fan too. That's one of my hobbies, and I was a baseball player when I was younger. So anyway, it's all part of it. You got to be positive and motivated, and you can't let things get you down.
I think the writing too also is therapeutic for us. We talk about, you have a background in psychology as well with your master's, and for me, I'm always encouraging clients, write it down as therapeutic, or write it, just
Well,
scribble it. No one's going to see it. Just get it out there.
you know what's interesting? You're saying that my sister, she actually was, she was in a halfway. They call it halfway or whatever. That's what they call it. Halfway is people when they're mentally ill and they're kind of put in a place with other people like that, and they get by. But she wrote me letters every week for like years, and I just kept packing away. And I actually still have those letters. That's not part of the book, but you could see. And even my dad, like he went to Europe one time, and he wrote, he wrote in his journal. And when he went there, his goal in life was to go to Europe, to go to Rome, see as an artist. He was compared to Michelangelo when he was 18 at the World's Fair by the way he drew, similar to Michelangelo in his hands and everything. And he's done murals in churches and everything else. But I noticed when he was on that trip, he had his final nervous breakdown. That's in the book. But I mean, it got to be, he was a beautiful writer. He helped me write in school when I was going to high school. He helped me with letters, and he never wanted me to cross out anything. He said, don't ever cross anything out. But his writing got all scribbly towards the end. And then I look at my sister the same way. She would write, but then she would get off a tangent and it becomes scribbles. So it must be a reflection of the mind. But like you said, it's therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because some of us are very verbal and some of us, write. I never saw myself as a writer until I started writing. I feel that I'm very verbal.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, I mean, my verbal is like a spaghetti chart. I mean, I just go all over the place. I sidebar 100 times, but that's me. And in writing, you have to be very succinct and stay on task. But that's the beauty of journaling, is no one's judging this. It's not going to a critique. So I want to talk about your sister. So she sounds amazing. And I want to say this. I always feel there's a connection, and I always try to find this connection with my guests and why they were presented to me and why I was presented to them. And I always know there's a tie. Your sister died at the same age that I am right now.
Wow.
So I thought that was really, I was like, there's my thread. There's my thread. So your sister's name was Kathy.
That's correct.
And did she start off as a child star, or was this just a sudden, oh my gosh?
No, she started, my mom was a beautiful lady, and there's a picture of her in my dad's book. And I mean, she could have been a movie star. She looked like Jane Hayward, one of those big actresses. And basically my dad was very jealous. He didn't let her get in. And I think she always wanted to be a singer and a movie star. She did vaudeville with my dad at 17. He robbed her out of the cradle at 16. He was 27. And he toured with her to 38 states. So yeah. So where are we going with this?
Your sister, did she
my
start?
Sister.
Yeah.
Okay, she started at 3 years old. So my mom kind of relived her life like a lot of parents do, and acting at the Academy of Arts in Hollywood. And actually one of the guys she went to school with was Mark Hamill, the guy in Star Wars. And I
Okay.
put a little bit about that in the book. But she trained since she was 3. She was 11 years old. She got her first big break by Richard Donner, the Bell-time director that just passed, that did Lethal Weapons, Superman, and all that. But he kind of took her and she was on the Banana Splits Adventure Hour, and she was one of the Sour Grape Girls. So, that was when it first came out. It was a combination cartoon and animals and stuff. And that was a big hit in the 60s, late 60s. And then she got her next big break on Happy Days. She competed with 400 different girls, and she got the part at 16. And she was on the cover of National TV Guide with Ronnie Howard, and she was with the Fonz, and she did the pilot, and she writes about it in the book. And but my mom was always on her. I know, I read a little bit about you. You're a model and all that, and my mom was always on her case to keep her weight down and keep her hair blonde, because in that generation you had to be blonde and be thin to be on TV or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
But so that, she went through a lot with that, and she didn't really have, I guess at 19, she had her first nervous breakdown. She did have a nervous breakdown at 19. She had some traumatic thing that happened to her, similar to what happened to my dad at 19, which is really strange that I picked up on these 2 books. And it kind of set her for a loop. She had a couple jobs in acting. She was on the Brady Bunch. She made a movie, Eat My Dust, with Ronnie Howard and stuff like that. But everybody loved her. Her saying used to be, "Is everybody happy?" That's why I was with my sons one day and they said, "Why don't you call it that?" Because I was walking in a room at a party. Is everybody happy?
I love that. That is everybody, and that's what you name the book. Is everybody happy? Because that tribute to her is her thing, which is kind of ironic. Is everybody happy? That's a people pleasing statement, right?
It is.
And here she's suffering mental illness.
Right.
Are you happy? And so at 19 to have that first breakdown, was this, and this is going back a little bit of a psychology look at it, do you think this was nature or nurture? Do you think this was something from being a child star, having this expectation put on you to be beautiful and perfect? Or do you think this was nature sort of passed down because genetics play a part with mental illness? What do you think?
I really think it had a combination of the two. I think what your first part, you say that kind of being a child star and she was in the limelight, but she wasn't happy. Just too many things were going on. I watch and I read about stars today and all the stuff that goes on. It just happens so fast. And a lot of them just get all messed up, and I think it might have been genetic too, because, I didn't really talk about much in the book, but I know she tried out some things being in that world of acting at a young age. And I've studied psychology a little bit and all that. And I know that if it's genetic, I don't drink, I don't smoke. I think if you do certain things, it kicks stuff off. And then if you have some traumatic thing happen, more so than a lot of people that don't have that within the genes of their family.
Yes, I agree.
That's not a doctor statement, but it's an old fact. When you read, it just seems like it's pretty common.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because it's just, maybe it's just that catalyst that starts the ball rolling, or and back in those days that was common, the drugs and alcohol were pretty common. And these child stars you read about, like different strokes, Dana, who committed suicide, and you hear about a lot of these child stars because they get so much experience and exposure at an age that they haven't really learned life yet. You're such a young age, you can't logically, I think, weigh it out. You're just being told what to do and you're being exposed, and that would be difficult. So I feel like that would relate to what your sister was going through.
I agree. And I remember I wrote in the book, and she wrote about it. She says it was hard to have a normal life. The last 2 years she was on set school, for all her acting and everything. And she really didn't, and then when she was supposed to be Rose Queen and all that, she wrote in there that the other girls were jealous of her, not Rose, Homecoming Queen. And they were all jealous of her, but she couldn't live the day to day. And just like you read about these stars, you look at, I'm a big Elvis fan. Look at him. He never had any privacy, and all these people that think that, oh my God, it must be such a great life. It's like your life's not your own, and that's kind of she was in that realm between 11 and 19.
Wow. And
Yeah.
those are your formidable years. Oh my goodness. Those are your preteens to your to your adulthood. That
Right.
whole period, that whole time period. So what type of mental illness and struggle did your sister have? Was it suicidal ideation? Was it anxiety, depression?
No,
What
she
was
had schizophrenic paranoia. She would
okay.
see things. She was think like, even it's in the book, she thinks she's married to. She was big into music and rock and roll, and she loved it. She was married to who was that guy, Van Halen, and like some of the singers and stars, and she'd say that she's going to have their baby and all this stuff, and I'm going, what? And then at one time I talked to her, and I was with her every couple of weeks, and she'd say, maybe they're not my kids. But I mean, she'd get off on these tangents, and and that's why you see people, like I saw one yesterday walking along the street talking to whoever they're talking to. It's like, I think in their own mind they believe it, but they're,
Oh,
and
sure.
one thing I think kept my sister going, and I think I wrote it in my notes to you, is sense of humor. My mom had a sense of humor. My sister had a sense of humor. I got a sense of humor. And it's where my dad had a heck, but it's weird in life. Even, you date women, other people, and it's like, if you have a sense of humor, a lot of people just don't know how to handle a sense of humor. Isn't that
it's all
funny?
it's also a coping mechanism,
Is it what?
it's a coping mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
Humor. It's how we lighten things up. I'm that awkward girl where it's like, if people are in an awkward moment, I'll crack a joke or I'll start laughing, or when it's a really serious moment and everybody's supposed to, like, I'm not the girl you take to a funeral, because it's these very serious moments, and my instinct is, let's lighten it up. I want everybody to be happy. So is everybody happy? There we go.
Yeah.
I want to lighten the mood and the moments. And so that's a very, well, look at Robin Williams. I mean,
exactly. Robin Williams. That's right. He was my cousin, actually. My first cousin was one of his best friends. And she was the first Betty Boop, and she did the voice for Betty Boop in the movie, but she did theater with Robin and everything. And, Robin, yeah, he was just out there. I mean, he got mixed up on all that bad stuff too. But she said she called him in Hollywood when he got that big part. She said, you wouldn't believe I got this big part. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. But he kept it under control. But yeah, and you kind of, my mom was that way. And I think I credit, as you notice in my notes, I could tell on a sales day, the last 35, 40 years I've been the top sales guy, I'd have the worst day of my life. And she'd say, and she'd make a joke out of it. I'm going, what is up with you, Mom? But I mean,
I get you, Mom. I get you, because my kids, it drives them crazy. My son, especially, he gets really high strung and anxious, and I'll throw out some sarcastic thing like, aren't you glad you have 2 ears, or something stupid,
Yeah, she was always, it's funny. She was always the one I'd hit the biggest sale I've made in my life, and she'd go, okay, what's your next one? It's like, can't you let me enjoy it for a moment?
And there you go. That's how she pushes you.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, both with your father and your sister, and your sister, I want to stay on her, having that schizophrenia, and to be able to keep those lines memorized, and with all that activity and expectation going on around her, because schizophrenia, you do get those hallucinations and those delusions, and those voices are there.
Exactly.
And I know, the past is lived through, life through chemistry. And I think we're doing natural stuff now, which is so much better. But there are, I think, disorders that require a chemical balance before we can work on the coping skills. So Does that amaze you that she was able to stay on task? And was she able to stay on task? And for how long till she stopped being able to work?
It was. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I have the script of Happy Days, the first script of the first show, and all the lines to memorize those, And what's interesting, it's in the book. She claims, which who knows if it's true. She taught Ronnie Howard how to kiss. That was the first girl. when she was 16, and she had to go over to Marshall, what's his name? Marshall, the director,
Gary
Gary
Marshall?
Marshall's house to practice it on his couch.
Love that story. Have you ever you haven't corroborated this with Ronnie, right? With Ron
No, I
Howard.
haven't. I haven't. That's the way I worded it. Is it could have been. That's all.
I think you need to send a copy to Ron Howard because a lot of her stories she writes about him, and it is a nod to him that this was a
It
big.
is. I'm thinking, and I'm having difficulty trying to get a hold of him. He's really protective, on who to get to, how to get to. And I'm working on that. It's not that easy to get to people, to get to those people that, I mean, he did know her. I saw the Fonz at the airport and about a year ago. And I told my wife, I said, that's the Fonz over there, and she said, really? I said, yeah. So I go up and he didn't recognize her. And then I pulled her up on IMDb and I said, hey, this is my sister. He says, oh my God, that was 40 years ago. I remember her.
See, she
Yeah.
left her mark, and this is the beauty of what you're doing. I always say, if I do nothing, I want to leave a legacy, and you're doing this for them. It is such a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I love that you're doing it for them. And now I want to talk about how wonderful you are too, because you are in the limelight as well. You're as amazing as they are. So sales has been your passion.
Sales has been my passion. I've had, on I mean, I do a number of things. I started paper route. I followed my dad. He sold calendars, pins, keychains. And then when I was working in a grocery store, going to college, putting myself through, I do these size jobs. And then I got my real estate license when I was in my 20s because I wanted to be able to get my part of the commission when I bought a house. I own at one time I owned 14 properties here in California, cut down to about seven now. Most of them are paid off. So financially, I'm fine. Um, and then in sales, I mean, I remember like I said, I just love people. I love, I don't want to sound corny, but I just love helping people. And, I'm sincere and I've kind of read all these books about sales, but I think I got some ideas of my own. I mean, Rich Man, Poor Man, I read that. And basically it's kind of my life in a different way. It's there's an art to it. In other words, everybody says, well, you got all this art around you and your family. Well, are you an artist? I'm a salesman artist. I mean, I paint a picture with everything that I do, that I've done. And I had a director that passed on years ago. When I started with Merck, the Calgon company, and he sat me at I'll never forget this. He sat me at a counter at a restaurant. And he says, "How do you do it every year?" And I don't even think about it. I mean, I'm one of those salespeople that I overseed everybody in quota. I mean, I could say that at this stage of my life, I do. And I'll be honest with you, and nobody would ever admit this. I never really look at my numbers. I just keep rolling and do what I love to do. And it's like all of a sudden I get Salesman of the Year award across the United States. It's like, and they all wanted to know how I did it. You got to be positive. You got to really, that zoning in you were talking about earlier. I zone in. I mean, I don't even see the competition when I get into sales. And I'm hoping, I know there's a lot of millions of books written every day. I hope your books do well, everybody. But, it's a different marketing. And, it's like I spent the last couple of years on the first book. I spent over $30,000 marketing. It's done well, on the in-between artists. But it's just, you're trying to figure it out. And I've done what's crazy. March 20th, 2020 is when my book came out. That's when COVID started. I had all these book signings lined up and everything. And I'm going, oh my God, this is crazy.
And that's what I love about, your timing and timing in general is you think it should be this way and you're going to be ready when you're ready and it's going to happen when you're supposed to. What I love is my son is you. He is like you're a mini you. He's 23 and the confidence of, Donald Trump. Literally my son could sell ice to an Eskimo. I, on the other hand, could not sell a jacket to an Eskimo or a fur coat to an Eskimo. And when you said there's an art to it, I wrote down it's the art of connection.
It
Because
is.
when you sell somebody something, it's because I connect with you. I connect
Right.
with what you're saying. I resonate with you. I feel your genuineness.
Mhm.
And if you were to give a class
Mhm.
on being as great as you are at sales, what would be 3 pointers you would give to basic bottom line being in sales to be successful?
It's to be successful, you got to study and know your product. You got to know what you're selling, number one.
Mm.
And then you got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to listen. I think you got to listen a lot more than you talk. I think that's number two. And then you got to be able not, you can't be afraid to ask for the order and to ask for what you want. And the whole key is of all this is remember, and it's by Zig Ziglar, and I live by it, and I think about it when I nail a big one. You've got to give other people what they want, and you'll get what you want. And I'm a firm believer in that. And it's like if you're good at it, you don't do anything illegal, but you do what's right for the customer and whatever you're trying to sell or whatever idea you're doing. I think those are, if that could be three key ones. And then be keep your connections and your relationships because you never know. I mean, and what my deal on sales, it is like you don't, I've sold things you sell in a moment, a short sale, but the long sales, like I'm working on something now that basically it was about 2, 3 years ago. This guy told me, hey, I think I could do this. And so I stayed in touch with him, and make a long story short, it happens. The sales cycle could be anywhere from a year to 2 to 3. You just never know. But if you constantly are involved with what you know and what you do, and you could help somebody, you're going to succeed. There's nothing going to stop you unless you let it. And you got to stay away from negative people.
Yeah. Yeah. And really the bottom line would be it's not what you're selling me, it's who you're selling me.
Exactly.
And I'm going to remember how you made me feel. I'm not going to remember your product. I can know you over the next 30 years and you can sell 20 different things, whether it's a new book, an old book, a product. And I'm not going to remember any of that. I'm going to remember, hey, I really, really like David. And
Exactly.
whatever he's selling, that's what I'm buying. And
They call it, yeah.
Go ahead. I think the hardest part of your suggestions is the ask. That's where my resistance is I don't want to ask anybody for anything. I want to give you something, so you want to ask for something from me. That's kind of the psychology behind sales, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, you got it. Like you said, I know that's what I was going to say. I took one of the first classes I took in sales with Merck. They brought this guy in. It was one of the first ones, when they used to put them on tapes and everything. It's called Secrets of Success. And it was called The Image of Difference. Those first 30 seconds you meet somebody, and I still believe in that. 30 seconds. That's your image of difference. And if they like you, they're going to put you up on that level of, I want to do business with that guy.
Say that again. 30 seconds.
Image of difference.
Image of difference.
Yeah.
Ooh. Ooh. I love that. Like they say, you only get one chance to make a first impression.
That's right. And what's weird, what's interesting, all these years, I mean, I'm talking 40 years, right? But 7 years ago, a guy called me up and he said, Dave, are you still doing this business? And I says, not really, but I could. And I did. And I've done really well just because he likes me and because he likes working with me. And, you got to stay in touch with people. Even my big accounts that I do today, in between writing, I mean, I try to always stay in touch. And one of the books I read too, but I don't talk to everybody every 2 weeks, but they say if you forget somebody and don't contact them when you're trying to sell something, if you wait longer than 2 weeks, they'll forget about you. And I forget that. They'll forget because this world is too busy. Too many things are going on.
Yes. Right? Yes. It's the visibility. And that's why with technology, because you and I were born in a different generation than the new people now.
Right.
We've had to embrace this technology because where they're going to see you now is not knocking on the door selling things door to door like it used to be, right? Or
No.
flyers or newspapers or classified ads.
Exactly.
Or the TV guide ads. But now you've got to embrace this technology and this marketing. It's a jewel, really. If you embrace the jewel of social media, you have
Right.
a chance to do free marketing on multiple platforms every single day. It's free. You don't have to do these paid commercials. You don't have to take out a billboard on the street. This is where today's entrepreneurs and young people have opportunities that I feel like we didn't have growing up. We had a
Oh, yeah.
certain, we had a path of expectation. You go to high school, you graduate, you get a job. We weren't even expected to go to college,
No.
or do the college thing, and then you stay in a job for 40 years, and then you retire, and then you get to live your life.
Exactly.
You said something a minute ago that reminded me, and I'm dating both you and I here. Do you remember that movie, The Secret of Success, with Michael J. Fox?
Yes, I do.
When you mentioned those tapes, I went, "Oh my God, it's one of my favorite movies." Where he's in the mailroom and then he's changing his clothes and running up to the office. He's doing the fake it till you make it thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But was that 80s or 90s when that came out?
I think it was the 80s.
Okay. To really, if you look at that, that's genius, and it's what people are trying to embrace today is believe it before it happens, envision it before it happens.
Oh, I agree.
And that's what he was doing.
Exactly. And I do that. I've done that. I mean, when I first started working with this company, I could really say it's happened. I mean, I went with one of the guys I work with, and we went out to Palmdale, California, and there was nothing out there. All there was Lockheed, Northrop, Rockwell. And I looked at it and I said, I'm going to own that territory. I'm going to own that. I'm going to sell every one of those. And I did. The next year I did, man.
Oh my gosh.
It's a vision you put in your mind.
Right.
The only thing is in sports, you put a vision, you're going to be the best. But you know what? Some guys are a little more talented physically than you are, then they'll just take you. You're another level.
The competition is much steeper when there's fewer slots to fill.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I have a client, a wonderful client that I coach, and he was all about soccer and sports, and now he's really about golf, and he always does these comparisons, psychology of sports.
Uh-huh.
And I've said, I need to write a blog on that, because it really is, if you take sports, you think about all the aspects that sports relate to life. It's, do you compare yourself to others? Are you pushing yourself to go far enough? How do you handle defeat? How do you handle an injury, that keeps you down for a while? So I love that thought process with your sales is, if I'm going to describe David, and I knew your image of difference as soon as I met you, was I saw a smile, I saw light, and I resonate, because I always say I don't see people, I see souls. And so you're going to resonate with that if you're that person. Now, I'm very upbeat and I'm very positive, and some people are not going to resonate with that. They're going to be like, "Oh God, not this little Miss Sunshine again." But you know what I mean? Yeah. But you're going to find your people, and they're going to find you. And so that's okay. Not everybody has to like us and approve of the way that we are, but the right ones will, and the right ones will buy from you as a salesperson. So as we wrap up, I just love this conversation with you. This is what I ask everybody. If I had a banner and you had 100,000 people marching behind you downtown and you have a movement, what's your banner going to say, David?
My banner is going to say, be positive, enjoy life. And if you want to read a book about positivity, check these two books out, The In-Between Artist and Is Everybody Happy? Life's short, enjoy every day. And you get it on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, or my website's davidfderazzi.com. And you won't forget the stories you read. and you might relate to a few of them, and it'll make your life better.
That is awesome. I was going to ask you to plug everything you just did. And you're my neighbor, by the way, because I'm in Arizona. So,
Oh, wow. Well, that's right.
yeah. So
I did see it. Yeah.
we're
How
neighbors.
about that? You're close. It's pretty hot there, huh?
It's disgusting. I'm over our summer. Yeah, we're only an hour flight away, so
Wow.
we'll meet and have coffee.
Yeah, that sounds good. You live in Mesa, Arizona?
I do.
Yeah, okay.
I
Yeah.
do. Which Phoenix?
Well, maybe
suburb.
someday when I come down there and see the Arizona Diamondbacks playing the Dodgers, I'll look you up.
You better believe it. Go D-backs. Woo!
Yeah.
And I'll give you Rams. I'll give you the Rams. But my Cardinals, I'm diehard. Been here since they came, and it's our year.
They're doing they look really good. They have a good shot this year.
I know.
Yeah, and it's funny. I wrote in my first book. I was there when Kirk Gibson hit the big home run years ago, and I wrote in my first book, the last sentence was, "I hope the Dodgers win a World Series someday." And the year the book came out, they finally did, but it was a short season.
It was. That's right. Guys, you guys have to get his book on Amazon. Are you doing any book signings or anything that we want to send people to, any events or anything? Or
I will be. I'm working on that. I will be coming up. I'm working on some, but just keep in touch. I put it on the blog. I put it on the website, and
perfect. Guys, we're going to send you guys to David F. Durazi. So that'll be his website. You can keep up on him and his books. His book will be out in a couple of months. He's in the final stages of getting it completed, and I can't wait to read it. I'm going to be first in line to buy that.
All right. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. One more question that I ask is, what is your shameless self-indulgence that you do for yourself?
Shameless self-indulgence. I'm a magician at the Magic Castle. I do that. I'm an amateur magician. I spend every week there going there and doing sleight of hand magic. I did that, at the Magic Castle. Have you ever been there? The number one in the world. It's there in Hollywood, and it's the only one in the world. It's a dinner house, a magic club. And, I read, that's shameless. And but that's something you're asking for, right?
Yes.
And that's my hobby, and I love it. And it's fun. My grandpa was a magician, and my mom, before she passed, she helped me pay for the classes, and I learned, and I trained under the best, Mark Wilson, and he passed on, and David Thornton. I mean, they're well-known magicians, and I'm in the magician world, so it's fun, something different. As you get older, you need some hobbies. I play golf. I'm okay at golf. I won the championship in my division, and I try to stay focused. Huh?
He's humble too. I love it. Definitely some strong performance genes going on in your family line and your ancestry. So then, and obviously your sons are carrying that on. So I thank you so much for being here, you guys. I'm so happy that all of you were here listening and you got to enjoy such a fabulous, fabulous guest today, David Durazi. Go find his books and definitely leave us reviews on the podcast, 5 stars, por favor. And if you would like to contact me or make any comments or like to be a guest on I Never Knew, I'm at lifecoachmaureen.com. My books are also on Amazon. So while you're buying David's, you can buy mine as well. You'll have like a twofer, and you'll have like a full weekend of reading of David and I. My dog is more enlightened than I am. And my dog is my relationship coach. And that teaches you how to date and find the love that you're looking for, as well as staying authentic and true to yourself. So David, you have a fabulous weekend, and what a joy to have you here. I feel like I have a new friend. You make me smile just by looking at you. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Maureen. I really enjoyed this. And thanks for having me on. And I'll definitely get your books as well.
Yes.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.